Hey there, bibliophiles and those raising bibliophiles. Are you looking to find good books worthy of your children to read and which ones you may want to avoid? Well, join me for today's book review, and I'll let you know if it should be added to your to-read list or your bad book list. This week's book review is the last book in the installment of the Endling series by Katherine Applegate, and this particular book is called The Only. And just like I've done before, I'm going to read just a little bit of a teaser into chapter 1. So this is a few pages in. Ambush ahead, Sabito warned. They split to your left and right and are waiting to close in behind you once you pass. We're ready, said Gambler. Maybe he was. I wasn't. I tightened my grip on Havoc's reins as he broke into a full-speed run. Wind ruffled my fur and filled my nostrils with 100 scents, including the rank stink of Eshwin and the sharp metallic smell of my own fear. You have 4 behind you and 8 ahead at the tree line, Sabito reported. The 4 behind are closing in fast. Bix! Gambler said, his voice eerily calm. Can you do something a bit crazy? You mean like go on this hunt? I asked, gasping for breath. Would you mind very much falling off your horse? What? I want them to think you're helpless. I am helpless. The large tussock of goo grass ahead would cushion your fall. Gambler wanted to use me as bait. That was the only way I could be of use in this hunt. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses and must contribute what we can. At least, that was what I told myself as Havoc closed the distance to the tussock. So that's a little bit of the beginning of this story, definitely jumping right back into action where your readers have left off in book 2. This final installment definitely opens on the brink of battle between the Drayland and the Murdano army. Kara is leading what is now called the Army of Peace with a goal of stopping the coming war between the other two armies. And really her goal is to save many lives. So Bix in this particular book is now Kara's ambassador, and she is sent to speak to different groups and species, particularly the Natites, to prevent the Nadian army from being able to make their way to Drayland through the ocean. So they control the ocean area, and so she's hoping to get them on her side. So the story, one of the opening scenes after what I just read, is she's being commissioned to go to them and kind of broker a deal between them. And it is a funny scene because Renzo really puts his foot in his mouth while we're there. But she does do that. They also have secured assistance from the Rapadons. And then there's another aspect of the story where Bix and Tobble travel to get the rest of the Wabix to join forces with them as well. So we get a little bit more insight into Tobble's background and his life and all of that. So that's when they kind of go to Bishop and they come back with the Rapadons to the battle really begins towards the end of the book. So that's really the bulk of the story, is Bix going and being an ambassador in these different areas. And then as they're coming back, battle begins to ensue. And then there's the force between the two battles when they do come to meet. Throughout this particular book, there is a budding romance. I mentioned it a little bit last week in book 2 review between Kara and Renzo. There's a few flirtatious comments in this particular book, harmless, all right? But the realization is that the others have recognized what's taking place between them, and we see it starting to grow a little bit as the readers. Renzo is deeply protective of Kara. He doesn't want her to go and lead the battle, which she is planning to do. And she actually commands him not to go or not to participate with her when she goes off on her own. But obviously being Renzo, he's not going to listen and he goes along secretly at first, but then more known. In the end of the story, the two do get married. There's a little epilogue of the story like 10 years later. They get married and they have twin children. And then in addition to their relationship, you also see a relationship between Gambler and I guess another Philevit, if I'm saying it correctly. Nalise enters the story, and so that's part of when one of the big battle scenes, and then she shows up. She's been injured. And when she realizes about Gambler, she wants to talk to him. And you find out that they've had a relationship in the past and that they have kits, and she's telling him that. So he finds that out, and then he ends up leaving to go with her to help protect the kits and to fight against the evil Drayland Velvet, who is leading the army against them and to attack. This particular book is actually a little more violent than the other two, and with that being said, you can obviously expect that, considering that we're talking about war and battle between these two forces. So there are some descriptions that may be a little much for some readers. Again, this book series is recommended ages 9 through 12. And as parents, only you know how sensitive your reader is, that maybe if they're on the younger side and super sensitive, that some of those details may be a little much for them. Definitely go and check out my book review. You'll find some quotes or anything that I thought might be just a little bit much for some readers that's there for you to see and for you to determine whether or not you think that might be too much for them or not. Tobble does kill a man in battle in this particular book. And so if you remember, he's the dear little Wabbick. He says, "I killed a man, Bix. I could have stopped, you know. He was defeated and I could have stopped. But I didn't, Bix. I didn't stop until he stopped breathing." So that's just an example of some of the violence and some of the darker things that are in the story. They definitely come across with that. Bix also kills a Murdano in this book. And so there's a lot. She's even wrestling with the fact that she considers it revenge. So you may want to kind of look at that. And she specifically, there's a quote from her on page 261 where she says, "As I'd watch his eyes grow dull, I'd recited the names of my family members one by one. Was it revenge? I suppose. But was it also justice? Yes, I hope so anyway." And so you do have that sort of theme or the idea about taking life that continues throughout the whole series. In this particular book, about the idea of vengeance and justice is definitely presented. So a worthy thing to talk about, not something you just kind of want to let lay there as a family, but you may want to re-look at that with your readers. Again, fantasy series. So as I've said in the other two book reviews, we have the magic that continues. The Theurgy is in this book. It also is a little bit more creepy, I guess. I don't really know how else to put it. There is a scene at which Bix is on his way to, him and Tobble are on their way to Bishop to go and see his family. And so they enter a forest, and so they talk about the eerie feeling that the Theurgy that is in this particular forest that's there. And it's really dark. They encounter like a spirit or a person that's kind of like trapped in a tree. And this spirit is able to talk to Bix and Tobble, explaining what happened to him that led him to being into this current state. And so I'm just going to read you a quote. So this is on page 109. "Closest to us was what appeared to be a human skeleton several feet off the ground. A foot protruded through dark leaves. Out of a low branch, a bony hand seemed to point to the sky. When I focused my unwilling eyes, a skull stared vacantly back at me just inside a deep cleft in the tree." And then you also see in this book, there's a mention of elements, and particularly 5 elements: fire, soil, wind, water, and spirit. And then there's a quote that says, "But it's spirit that unites them all. Fire, soil, water, and wind have no meaning if we don't understand them. It's spirit that gives us understanding and curiosity and courage." So those are just some of the things that are presented in the book. I definitely want to make you aware this book handles a little bit more some heavier things. So as a family, just to make you aware that those are in there, whether or not your reader is able to handle them. Again, there's some really good quotes in the book, good themes, that sort of thing. If you go to my review, you can see some of those quotes that I wanted to highlight that I think really stand out. Overall, I enjoyed the series. And so while there has been some violence and there has been some magic in it, if those are things that are prohibitive for a family, that's definitely the purpose of these reviews, is to let you know. For me, I felt like it was okay. And so my son also read them because the messages and themes in the book I thought were really good and worth exploring. The ideas of courage and overcoming fear and leadership and loyalty and companionship and those sorts of things, as well as the fact that everything is valuable in the world that God created, and that we need to do our best just to be good stewards. You also have this idea of the defense of life in hard situations that can be an opportunity to explore with readers topics and situations within the story. So those were strong things able to talk about and explore together as we're looking for that. As far as middle grade fantasy goes, this is one I did enjoy. I would recommend with caution as far as the magic and violence. That could be a little bit much, but overall, I thought it was a really good series. Definitely one that if that is what you're looking for and it seems to tick a lot of boxes, I would add that to your read list. If not, I would just kind of set it aside, but I wouldn't really mark this as one of those bad books that's not worth your time. So hopefully that's helpful to you as a family, and join me next week for another book review.